Hi, what are we talking about?
I don't know what's happening. What year is it? That was very
Oh, jeez.
frustrating, but I'm glad I got to work at all.
Big fat boys. Bad GM, bad.
All right, so now for the podcast version, I should have to cut out like 25 minutes.
That's fine.
If you're
They
watching this
can.
on YouTube, I really
Sorry.
hope that you stayed with it because I don't know how to edit it down, or else maybe I'll try to figure something out. But yeah, we're going to talk about big boys, Ogre Kingdoms. We're going to talk
Sorry.
about. So first up, what's gaming? What have you been up to in the gaming world, Taylor? Could be minis, could be the other game, could be video games. Any of those things?
So now, besides the Lost Omen podcast, Pathfinder Actual Play, which you can find on professionalcasual.com. I don't know
Or
if anybody
anywhere
knows
else
about
you
that one.
listen to podcasts.
You guys owe us 15 minutes. You call my wife and tell her that. I really haven't been touching minis lately, which is and I played on this thing, Professional Casual Network. It's on that screen. The other night with Marvel Crisis Protocol. It was fantastic.
Yeah, you were awesome.
That list was awesome. Like I got to be honest, I'm reading more about it, and I was like, I could have put anything behind it. It was like playing Tau. Like you didn't really need to do anything.
Even I could have won with that list.
Oh
Maybe.
yeah,
Probably
the
not.
power face. And then lots of Minecraft on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Throlash Gaming, if anyone's interested. As well as some World of Warcraft late at night when I'm feeling saucy. But that's me.
Even Tim doesn't play World of Warcraft anymore. What are you doing?
Listen, I got a lot of game time for Christmas, so I'm just trying to use it. Right?
Worth it. That's awesome.
How
Also, thanks
about
Brock
you?
Castle for subscribing for 2 months. That's awesome. Thank you so
2
much.
months. That's
How about I mean for me it's like the same thing all the time. We got Crisis Protocol. Tomorrow I'm playing with the brand new Inhumans. I got them painted up. I finished painting them today. Super fun. Love those kits. They were great. I mean, I get to play with Lockjaw. He's a giant dog.
yeah.
What more can you love? He's a giant dog that can teleport him and other people.
Yeah. What's not to love?
He's great. Mahiniker, thank you for subscribing. Awesome.
Oh my gosh, all the
Subscribe
subs.
with Prime.
That's fantastic.
Fantastic. Love it, love it. Other than that, Danny got me Luigi's Mansion 3 on the Switch for Valentine's Day.
Oh.
It's so good. I love it
It's like
so
my
much.
favorite Nintendo series ever.
Right? Did you ever play? So I played the first one on GameCube. It was fantastic. Love that game so much. It's so good. The second one, I think it was called Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon.
Something like
Is
that.
that
Yeah.
right? That was on the 3DS. Did you ever play that or the DS?
I watched a actual play, a let's play. I didn't actually get to play it, but I played way too many hours of Luigi's Mansion.
So good. This new one is so,
Thank you, Dagna.
Yeah, right. I just had to walk around for a minute for it to work. I mean, whatever worked.
Daddy came in and fixed it.
But Luigi's Mansion 3, you're in they go to a hotel. So it's got, I think there's 16 floors. It looks like in the elevator. You have to find elevator buttons to get to new levels.
Oh, that's cute.
It's really cool. The first 5 or 6 levels are all hotel rooms. Or hotel levels, and it's very similar to the original. And then once you get to I think it's 4, 6, and 7, it starts getting weird. And it's this one's all plants have taken over this level, and then this one's all it's like Knights of the Round Table dinner thing you go to, dinner show. So it's you have to go through a dungeon and whatnot, and then the most recent one I did was a movie studio floor.
It's so quirky.
I was like, what is happening? This is great. It's really fun. I like it a lot.
It's so Luigi.
Yes. And Lily and Felix are really into watching it. Lily likes to go around and just kind of suck things up with the vacuum. She doesn't like it when they actually get into battling ghosts. It's too much, and she doesn't have the reflexes or understand the controls well enough. But she likes finding all the money. Whenever there's coins and stuff that comes out, sometimes there's bills, and she goes, "You gotta get the cash." You nerd.
Why is she such a goober?
Right? It's amazing. But yeah, that's what I've been playing. So tomorrow on this Twitch, Monday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we've got, the Power Phase. The name left in my head for a second. And tomorrow I'm throwing down with Tim. We're doing the new scenario that came with the Inhumans. Something about Terrigen Mists, of course. It's a 20-point threat.
Wow.
And I'm playing all the Inhumans and a couple other things I don't want to tell Tim before we play.
That seems fair.
I imagine if he's watching, he just went, rude. So I'm
No,
really
that totally
excited.
seems fair.
Really excited to try them out and probably just get wrecked because I don't know how to use any of these new characters, but it's going to be fun. I'm really excited for all of them.
Just give pets to the dog. That's it.
Yes. He's got a rule that if there's somebody within 2 of him at the start of his turn, he just gets 3 power because they say, who's a good boy? And then he's like, yeah. So I'm going to say that a whole bunch tomorrow night, and everyone's going to hate it except me.
I'm going to love it.
Right? At least somebody will. All right, so next part, if that's all for gaming, talk about my weekly Black Library recommendation, which is going to get difficult pretty soon because I'm starting to get through a lot of the things that I'm realizing that I've read a ton of Go Trek and Felix, and then like a smattering of other things, but it's like, oh, I mean, I could talk about 15 to 18 weeks of Go Trek and Felix, but
I mean, when you do the dwarf one, that could be like the dwarf month.
That was 2 weeks ago was the dwarf episode.
Oh, come on.
That one's on YouTube now. You want to go?
I've got a whole army in that brown case, the one in the back there.
Nice job. Thanks, Nation, for subscribing. But today I want to talk about one. I picked this because I knew you read this. I've seen it on your shelf. We talked about it in the past. You might recognize the author because I've brought him up a couple of times already. Is Guardians of the Forest by Graham McNiell.
Great book.
What do you remember about this book, Taylor?
A lot of dryads killed a lot of people, and it was fantastic. So the biggest reason I picked that book up is because when I started playing fantasy, because of you, thanks. Actually, I think it was your brother and you, so I can't give you all the blame.
Little A, little B.
Right. I started with Wood Elves, and I think they were yours. I bought them off of somebody. Maybe. They might have been yours.
I started painting some Wood Elves. Maybe I had them very briefly.
So my favorite thing from the Wood Elf army was dryads, and I picked this book up because it had some Wood Elf lore, and I was like, oh, sweet, like this is absolutely fantastic. And then I don't know, a couple of chapters in the book, everybody gets slaughtered by dryads. I was like, this is amazing.
Right? Yeah, so this one focuses on the Wood Elves of Athel Loren, a big old forest inside of and within the boundaries of Bretonia, but it is decidedly Wood Elf territory. No one goes in there, and that's kind of what this is about. Knights and other people getting too close and messing with things, and the Wood Elves getting mad about it because that's what they do.
Yep.
They get
so
mad
that was
about things.
I can't remember what the original fight was over. It might have been like orcs and goblins against Bretonia. Anyways, some knight and some knight's lover or something like that gets dragged into the woods, and then he goes into he goes to find her, and everybody dies except for him, and they kind of just like,
spoiler alert.
I know, right? Sorry. They kind of like
first few minutes probably
grab him into like almost like a prisoner, but at the same time they're just kind of keeping him around because he held his own against some things, and then it just shit escalates. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but I just did. Like
a little bit, it's fine.
PG-13, got it.
It's going on YouTube, so just a little bit is okay.
All right, X-Men video, okay. Where he's only allowed PG-13, like he can only say one F-bomb, and
sure.
He's the best at what he does, and it's dropping one F-bomb per video.
I like it. But yeah, this one's great. Just it's a fantastic little mix of high adventure, probably a little bit of horror elements with the spooky forest. But I like this one a lot. It's Graham McNiell. It's well written. It's a standalone, so if you don't want to jump into a whole series, this one is. I thought there was going to be sequels to this one, but there's not. There's also the Orion trilogy if you want to get into more stuff with the Wood Elves. But this one, Guardians of the Forest, is real solid, and I highly recommend it, and I like it a lot.
Well, let me look up the Orion trilogy right now, because I'm going to read that.
Right? I'm sure you could get it like on ebook type thing.
Probably.
All right. Let's talk about the lore focus of the week, especially since we had that delay. We need to get into it because there's a lot here. So I want to talk about Ogre Kingdoms.
Big fat
The
boys.
big guys themselves.
This. So, Wood Elves were my baby in fantasy, and ogres were like, I don't know. Wood Elves are where I started, and ogres are where I stayed. You know, just
Yeah,
so good.
this is where it all started. The original
Right.
Ogre book. When this was announced, it was just like, wait, what? We get a whole army of monsters? This is so exciting. And this book is so fantastic.
Actually, you keep talking because I got something special. I
Oh, you got
think.
something else there? Because of the lifespan of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay or Warhammer Fantasy, Ogres only got 2 books. This was their 8th edition book. I think they got skipped over in 7th. But actually, I might be lying about that. I think they got 3 books. Is this the first one? Yeah, this is the first one. Never mind. They got 2 books. And
You're not wrong.
yeah, Mohaniker says it's quite a jump from Wood Elves to Ogres. Yeah, I like to try to make the recommendation of the week kind of fit the theme of the lore focus, but I don't know of any books that are much about Ogre Kingdoms at all.
This is the only one.
Oh
This
man,
is the only one.
every time I'm over there, I think about stealing that from you because that's he's got Taylor just held up the 300th issue of White Dwarf.
White Dwarf. Yeah.
Which is so good. That had a world map in it that I bring up regularly. It had awesome articles. It has the full Noblar army in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, so good. Yes.
This is a treasure.
Yeah, Mohaniker just said the single best White Dwarf in creation. 100%.
This is a treasure of mine. I will hand this down to my children.
Right? I'm so jealous because I don't have that because back in the day, Timmy, my brother, had a subscription to White Dwarf, so they were all his. So once like we both moved out of my parents' house, he had all those at the
I
time.
have a feeling that the map is still in this one because I have a different one that's laminated.
Nice. I used to have the map laminated on my wall, and then Timmy, when he was like, "Hey, can I have my map back?" and I was like, "No."
No, but fine.
I guess it's yours, so I'll give it back, but I don't want to do that. So with the ogres, the best thing about their newer book is we got this map out of it of the Ogre Kingdoms. I can get the right thing to click on. I'm gonna blow this up a bit, and then I gotta bring it on top.
So I'm big into maps in general, and that like the dwarf map in the dwarf book was great, but this map here is just awesome because it's an area that we never experienced before in any book.
Right. It was brand new at the time. 8th edition books had these awesome maps in them, and this was just, we didn't know much about the Mountains of Mourn at all. With the earlier book of the Ogre Kingdoms, there was so much just establishing them as a new playable race that there wasn't so much, they didn't focus as much on this kind of stuff. And this map is so awesome. It shows exactly where the Great Maw is. So a little bit before we go in talking about what's on this map, we should talk a little bit about the ogres in general, right?
Yeah, sorry, nostalgia trip, just looking at it.
Right? Oh my gosh. So ogres are another one of the races created by the old ones, similar to pretty much everything else.
Yep.
They're kind of like the unspoken gods of the Warhammer world that really only the lizardmen still even acknowledge or know about. But ogres are cool because they're like 10-foot tall monsters of just meat. They're covered in muscle and fat, and they love their big bellies. The size of their gut is a big part of their, societal. It's kind of like the horns in Beastmen. The bigger the horn, the higher the status. The bigger the gut, the higher the status.
Which I can relate to. Like,
Yeah, whatever. But their god is the Great Maw, which they see as just the all-consuming hunger of everything.
Like literally, it's the giant mouth that's constantly eating. That's it. That's a god to them,
right? So a lot of ogre culture is around eating what you can eat, what you can stomach, what you can keep down. An ogre can eat virtually anything.
Yep.
In the first Ogre Kingdoms book, there's this great article that's supposed to be by like a doctor of the Empire who dissects an ogre that's died, and they find all kinds of things in its stomach. And it's like, I went through, a dozen, surgery knives cutting this thing open because its muscles are so thick and tough and its skin. I love that stuff. And they find like the list of what they find in its stomach is amazing. If
That's
it's a,
not in Liber Chaotica, is it? Oh, it's in that book. Okay.
yeah, it's in the first army book they came out with. This was back in you want to take a guess? What year do you think this book came out in?
96.
What? 90? No,
Huh?
2004. You dingus.
It's pretty close.
No, 96.
Yeah. I was only, what, 8 years off? Is that right? I don't know.
You were, I don't know, really off. Of course not. Oh, here it is. So let's see. What kind of things did they find in the stomach?
Go the
Easily
people.
says easily 30 pounds of raw meat in early stages of digestion.
Ugh.
An ornate hilt of a sword of far eastern design. 5 chunks of rock. This could indicate that ogres have gastroliths, pebbles and rocks that they swallow in order to aid digestion and breakdown of large matter.
Which I doubt
Realistic.
they just want to eat rocks, to be
Yeah.
honest.
A near complete skeleton of a horse, Bretonian by its bone structure. Bones that I would guess belong to small goblinoid. 3.
Noblars.
Various articles of clothing that could belong to the raw meat above. A battered Bretonian gorget, however you want to say it,
I don't know what that
with
means.
neck vertebrae within, though the flesh has long since been digested. Also, twisted lance tip. The gorget and lance tip are both in extreme state of decay, indicating that over a long period of time, an ogre could digest metal. And then finally, a standard design Himmler & Co. dueling pistol.
Because
All in the stomach of one ogre.
why not?
Because they'll eat anything. They're so
They're like
great.
Bruno. They're 10 feet tall, 10 feet around.
Bruno, but infinitely more terrifying. So talking about terrifying, the leaders of the ogres. So the ogres live in tribes among the Mountains of Mourn, and they just kind of hang out, exist. They like to fight like orcs, but they don't go on these like rampages all over just to fight. If they did, everybody would be screwed. But they are led by a tyrant, the biggest of boys in the tribe. Why can't I get this image?
Oh, that's gorgeous. Look at that beautiful picture.
So here we have a tyrant. We can see the almighty gut plate that the ogres wear. They don't typically cover themselves in armor. They're not, not Knights of Bretonia by any means. But they're not stupid. They will protect themselves in a fight, and they love the gut plate.
Speaking of Knights of Bretonia, that's a really nice knight helmet in his hand.
Right? Yeah. You got to crack the crunchy shell to get to the sweet stuff within.
Yeah, you can't fit a belly in that armor. That's for darn sure.
Yeah, even...
That's for darn sure.
I love these ones with like big old tusks coming off of it and whatnot. They have a very like primitive tribe theme to them, but kind of mixed with like Mongolian themes as well. I love the look of the ogres. They always have that Fu Manchu mustache.
Yep.
It's very common. They're
Yep.
kind of like the Khans, but also this like bone theme all over the place. He's got this sweet axe in this image. But this is a really cool tyrant. They're going to be the biggest and the best from their tribe, and they're going to rule with an iron fist. Sometimes
Biggest
literally.
Yeah, literally.
They might have an iron fist.
The biggest and the meanest, for sure.
Yes, I mean, being mean is definitely part of it.
Yeah. Kill and eat other ogres just because.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're a great meal. They're huge.
Yep.
Another leader of the ogres tribes, leader in spirit, is the butcher,
which is by far probably my favorite unit.
Oh yeah. So this isn't the best picture ever. I picked this one for today because I wanted to show off all of his accoutrements on his apron, where he's got big old flensing knives. He's got hands and feet just like hanging there on his big old white apron. He's got gnarly teeth going in all directions.
It's I don't think that apron is white anymore.
Yeah, apron that was once white. He does have looks like a knee, like the lower part of somebody's thigh, and then their knee and a little bit of the leg beyond, which just seems like why would you cut it there? Like the knee would be the place to cut it, but it's an ogre.
And a rolling pin for some reason. Huh.
There's a rolling pin on there. I totally missed that. Love
Huh.
it. So butchers, I love butchers because I love the lore behind them. Actually got a butcher model here I painted for JB years ago, but is kind of mine now. Where their whole thing is they do what's called gastromancy.
And ladies and gentlemen, that entire thing is a hunk of pewter.
Yeah, that's one big old metal model. I have my tyrant here too. I forgot to show when we were looking at the tyrants, but I love this model so much.
So
It's
those are
super
what,
rare.
like 6-7 pounds a piece, or
Yeah, right. They are hefty,
so
especially for a model.
when you're playing Ogre Kingdoms, if you lose, you have literal weapons
Just
to
throw them
throw
at
at your
people.
opponent. You know,
Thanks for hanging out, Mohaniker. So the butchers. I wanted to find this picture. I can't remember what book it's in. Where the butcher's like eating something, and he's like biting into it, and it's like spurting out with blood and
that
whatnot.
should be the current Ogre Kingdom book. I'm
Is
pretty
that the
sure.
newer one? And maybe if I can find it, I'll hold it up to the camera because I was looking for that picture online and could not find it. I
It,
love that
it's
picture.
I think it's either in like the little lore before, or it's on the butcher page, the butcher slaughtermaster page.
So why don't you talk about how does gut magic work?
So essentially, the more crazy stuff you eat, it's kind of like an offering to the Great Maw, and that imbues you with the Great Maw's magical powers somehow, right?
Yeah, why
So
not?
usually, right. So the crazier stuff you eat is the key point there. Like when you literally eat certain types of hearts, or you eat like,
Troll guts.
right, troll guts, you can make people more resilient and regrow their flesh. With spine marrow, you literally like just take a whole spine and like and just suck out all the marrow from it, and that way people get tougher, you know.
Crack
It's
it open.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic how it works. You just eat crazy things. They're almost like 40k orcs, where it's like, I think this is how this works, and the Great Maul is like, yeah,
Yeah,
makes
sure, why
sense to
not?
me, right? The
I like that
Hellheart,
idea too.
I think, was that the Hellheart, the magic item,
That was one of the things they had, yeah.
right? So in
That
the new
everybody
book, the
hated.
Hellheart, I can't remember if it was like a chaos dragon or some ridiculous heart, and they just ate
Mm,
it, and all sorts of magic exploded everywhere. It was awesome.
I love it, yeah. So they would often carry like big cauldrons with them to cook in during the fight and just eat stuff, and magic happened.
Scrag, man.
Scrag the Slaughterer. He's
Scrag.
amazing. He didn't have any hands. He just had big knives instead. He had knife hands, and he had this huge cauldron just what's the word? Strapped to him? Not
Yeah,
strapped
so
because it's
they
like
took
in his
metal
skin,
hooks, yep, and they just hooked it into his skin and bone.
right? Because that makes sense.
Why not?
Terrifying. Uh, but I love gastromancy so much, and I love that in mechanic wise in Warhammer Fantasy Battle, it worked differently than other magic. Like it always can because they weren't like doing incantations to cast spells. I think it just kind of happened.
Right.
We should Nation says we should be glad Bruno only eats pies. Yet so far, yeah. If anybody's going to be a gastromancer in that crew, it'd certainly be Bruno over on the Grim podcast of Perilous Adventure. If you're not
I
listening
gotta
to
be
that yet,
honest. They would probably find Bruno ogres and be like, "But how did a runt get here?" Like,
he's totally a runt. I was gonna go with other
so far.
character type um, things from the kingdoms, but I want to talk a little bit about the runts of the ogres.
These are my second favorite.
Yeah,
These are my absolute second favorite.
I love these guys, the gorgers. So gorgers are really cool. They're ogres, but they were born a little weird. They weren't covered in fat. They pretty much have no fat. That'll be the picture on my side of the screen here if you're watching on Twitch or on YouTube, and they're just weird creatures because they're kind of malformed ogres, and we can see that they're just ripped. They're still like 10 feet tall. They look the same as an ogre, except they have no fat on them, and they are typically like shunned. They don't kill them at birth or anything like that, but they're like shunned from ogre society, and they're like, go live in that cave. Nobody wants to see you. You're weird and gross, and you make everybody uncomfortable. And then in the cave, they just become like feral
Yep.
essentially, and they're
Yep.
just sometimes when they go to war they just release the gorgers. So they had these cool ambush rules the gorgers did, and they could just pop up out of nowhere and just bite your head off. They had sweet killing blow rules, and because they would come out of nowhere, they had terror, so things would run away from them because it was just like, oh my god, what is that? And they weren't mindless, but they were uncaring of their own safety or anything, so they were unbreakable too.
So the two favorite things about these guys is because they've lived in caves their entire life. When ogres either let them out or go and find them and drag them out, they're essentially blind because they haven't ever seen light, right? Ever.
Right.
So a lot of them, like, they'll strap like leather across their faces, or they're actually like sew their eyes shut because they don't need them, and they find things through scent. So when there's bloodshed, gorgers like go straight towards it.
Like a shark.
Right.
An ogre shark. Shark ogre?
So
Shoger.
Ugh, a shoker? That's a man-eater right there.
Shark ogre.
A shark ogre? That's a man-eater. So they just live to feed. They're constantly hungry, and they just eat and eat, which is weird for an ogre, right? Like, it gets to the point where ogres are so terrified because of their constant hunger. And that's one of the reasons that they're unbreakable, is just because they don't care what's killing them. They have food.
Yeah, they're happy. Oh, I love gorgers. Opposite in this picture here are the ones I never got any models of. I always wanted to try these guys. They're always considered not great on the table, but I love that they were included in a Warhammer army at all, are the Yetis. And they're super cool because they're really fast. They have this like cold aura around them. Their weapons are magical ice.
Which is awesome.
Which I love anything to do with ice. That's why Iceman posters on the wall over there.
Iceman, Ice Dan,
You can really only see Mystique right now, but but yeah, I love Yetis, and they're just kind of a cool inclusion. They gave them something fast, because ogres were actually pretty fast. And it was just kind of like they kind of had understanding, the ogres and Yetis, that ogres wouldn't eat them if the Yetis fought with them, because the Yetis were kind of stringy anyway.
Yep.
They didn't taste very good, but
they have like really
Yetis.
Tough fur too, which was like gross to chew on.
Yeah, I mean, get hair all over your tongue. No thanks.
Right. It's like Velcro because they already had hairy tongue. Okay. One of the coolest things about Yetis was as Dan said, they're like frost aura. So on the tabletop, I think it was like -1 initiative to everything. It just made everything like super cold, and they were like, wouldn't be as quick to strike, all that sort of stuff. That was
I think it was
kind of a neat
-1
part
to
of
hit
them.
them.
Oh, that might have been it. I think
But
you're right.
yeah, it was something that slowed them down. They were really cool. I like them a lot. I want to jump back to the leaders of the tribes, and kind of like the weird uncle that shows up after he goes on a pilgrimage for a while, and then they're just kind of like, "Wow, you're so strange. What is wrong with you? Why are you like this, Firebelly?" Firebellies. These are one of my favorite things when they first came out for ogres. They weren't in the first version of the book of the army, and they wanted to give them something a little bit different. And they're a more classic style wizard, and they're fire wizards. And what they do is they worship like a different interpretation of the Great Maw.
So it's a volcano that's in the Mountains of Mourn. I can't remember the name of it. If you have that map, I think it's in there. But they see this volcano as like the fiery anger representation of the Great Maw. I can't remember what. Firemouth, yes.
So it's ogre name. You don't have to think about it too hard.
Right. That's fair. Firemouth.
So Firebellies would go there.
Yeah. This is such a cool backstory for a model. So essentially, they like threw them into the volcano, didn't they?
I'm pretty sure they went into the volcano if they survived.
If they survived, they were a Firebelly. If they didn't, well,
congratulations!
The Firemouth didn't like them, so.
What are you gonna do, right?
Right.
Just be on fire and dead.
So I'm gonna be that guy. I worked out beforehand, and I've had 2 of these. You keep talking. I'm gonna tinkle.
You would. So Firebellies, I love these guys. They had the coolest model. I never got my hands on one. I know Taylor did for a while when he played ogres, and they were just cool because they were more classic style wizard. They worked the same way as any other wizard. They had to take fire, but it was just cool. It gave them something else offensive that they could use in the army, and they just looked really cool. They could breathe fire. So with the leaders, we're talking about those that lead the tribes, either in battle or like spiritually. In the case of the butchers and the firebellies, I want to talk about the leader of them all. I've complained in the past about how a lot of races got like the over leader of their whole race as a model. Like we talked about Thorgrim Grudgebearer a couple weeks ago. Grimgor Ironhide last week is kind of the leader of all the Black Orcs in a way. He would be the leader of all of them if you get them together. Karl Franz, of course, for the Empire. You could with the Bretonnians, they had Leon Leuenker. But the High Elves never got Phoenix King Finnebar. Ogres, they did get their over leader, who was called the Over Tyrant. I love this guy so much. So this is Grecius Goldtooth. And this guy is just amazing. He's the biggest ogre you ever did see. He's got that glorious belly that's just hanging out there. And he is the Over Tyrant. All of the tyrants swear fealty to him, or he will crush them. Literally. So this guy's probably more like 12 feet tall or something, and he is immensely strong. And you can see here, he likes to show off his gut. He doesn't even bother with a gut plate, because he's just so confident in his abilities and his army and his warriors. He would ride to war on a palanquin of Nobblars, little goblin kind of offshoots, kind of like cousins to goblins, basically just goblins. They look a little bit different, but just about like the shape of their nose and whatnot. But he would ride on a palanquin of like dozens of these things, and they would carry him to battle. And he had this huge mace that he would swing. That in the tabletop game he had strength 10 with it, and I think it may have also ignored armor, but strength 10 basically does anyway. And he had this awesome rule that was like everybody has a price, where he would, as the Over Tyrant, I mean, he's called Grecius Goldtooth, right? You can see this, if you're watching the video, he's got this huge necklace of just all kinds of stuff. Welcome back. And he would tempt those that were fighting him with gold and say, hey, we could just not fight if you just, basically just tithe to me, give me some money, and we'll be all right. Ogres, above all, other than food, are mercenaries and wanna make money. They like glittery gold stuff. So he had this awesome rule. Yeah, whatever counts as money. He had this awesome rule in the game where he could like pick 3 units a turn or something that had line of sight to them, and they would suffer from stupidity. Because they'd be like, do we fight or do we just give them the gold? I don't want to fight these ogres.
It was really fun with Dogs of War, because it just made this great little scenario where it's like your Dogs of War units, like, but he's gonna pay me more.
Yeah, right. I totally forgot to talk about in the beginning about how ogres came about as an army, because like I said, they didn't come out to 2004. They were, for a long time, you could take ogres in most armies, and they were called Dogs of War. You could take them as mercenaries. They filled certain slots. And even with the first book, they still had that rule where almost any army could take a unit of Iron Guts.
Mm-hmm.
Just to have some monsters in there and have some awesome stuff. And eventually they realized that people really liked them and were able to create their own army out of it. One thing that we got with this new army, one of my favorite units, just because of the idea is so ludicrous, is an ogre artillery unit.
Which one?
The Lead Belchers.
Oh, yeah.
Love these guys. So these are ogres that carry cannon and use them like blunderbusses.
Awesome.
You can see in the back of the image there's one. They just load them up with weapons that they get from other armies that are too small for them to wield anyway. And they're full of like swords and axes and halberds, and they just blast them across the battlefield and just shred people apart. They're so amazing. I love these guys.
So my favorite part of this picture, and it's one of my favorite minis, is the Nobblar standing on top of the ogre's shoulder with the fire ready to light a cannon. Oh, do you have one? Oh my gosh.
I'm pretty sure I got one here somewhere. Keep talking, I'll find it.
It's so much fun. It's so good.
Oh, I had it facing the right way the first time.
So because ogres don't really like, when there's Nobblars around, they like to just like push them around and make them do things. So they'll just say to the Nobblar, like, go into this cannon, dump a whole bunch of black powder in, and then fill it with stuff.
Yeah.
Whatever you can find. And then Albler's like, yeah, I can do that. Don't eat me. It's so good. And this is one of my, God, I love every unit in the darn book.
Right? They're so amazing. I love these guys so much. They're so much fun. So just the idea that they're carrying around a cannon that would take a number of humans to pivot on a structure and then just boom.
Bruno, this is how you use hand cannons, okay?
If Bruno ever learns how to use his blunderbuss, this is all I'll be picturing every time he does. Love him.
And that's in the book. That's like the quote for the lead belchers is "boom."
Classic.
It's so good.
To back up their artillery, another unique unit they got with the 8th edition, their second version of the army is everybody hates it unless you're using it. They're terrifying. They're hard to kill, but they're really good at killing. Oh, I missed it. There we go. I missed the button. Mournfang Cavalry. And these guys were gross. For the longest time, we had Rhinox pulling the scrap launcher we'll talk about in a minute, which were basically big old woolly rhinos. And people wanted Rhinox riders for the longest time. Forge World did make them, but they weren't like official in the book. And then with 8th edition, we got Mournfang Cavalry instead, which are kind of like giant Smilodons that are so big that ogres can ride them. And they have these huge tusks.
Are brutal.
They're disgusting. You get charged by a unit of these, say goodbye to whatever you got.
You only need... Go ahead.
But they're so big and expensive, you only have units of maybe 4 at the most because of the size of a chariot. So if shooting kills 1, they're probably going to run away. They were actually awful.
Listen.
It happens so often. It was like, okay, well, my shooting is not very good against ogres because, like, what, am I going to kill 1 ogre from that unit of 12? You're not going to lower your attacks. But if I kill 1 Mournfang rider, the rest could very easily run away with their crappy leadership 7. So they were weird because they hit like a sledgehammer, but actually took some finesse to use properly on the table because it was so easy to get them to just poof.
Right, exactly. So if you went up against a unit of 4, which without exaggeration was this big, right?
It took up so much table space.
Which is just stupid. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
It was, please, dear God, kill one of them and make them run away.
Yeah.
If there were two,
please.
Right. If there were 2 units of 2, it was like, that's still horrifying, but I'm not. No, okay, I need one of them to run away, please. They were so scary.
Redundancy was terrifying with ogres because anything they had hit hard.
Mm-hmm.
You know what hit the hardest?
Oh, is this a Stormhorn?
No, the scrap launcher.
Oh, it's the best. Best artillery in the game.
Right, so we talked about Nobblers a little bit. Nobblers are kind of like, they're essentially goblins, but they're kind of like cousins to goblins. And they hung around with ogres because ogres would eat them. It's not like they were like, no thank you, because that's not what something ogres would do, ever. But they weren't a fan of Nobblers because they have like no fat on them at all. They're really tough and stringy, and just not good in general. So the ogres let them kind of hang around most of the time because they're really good at building stuff.
Yeah, they're useful.
They got little dexterous hands that the ogres didn't have. Their hands are big and clumpy. But the nobblers could build things, and sometimes they would either talk an ogre into wrestling one up, or they would find a young Rhinox and strap stuff to it and make a scrap launcher. Which is my favorite thing. My favorite thing. So it's a catapult similar to the lead belchers that they would just load up with random bits of metal, armor, and weapons from previous fights that were too big for nobblers to wield but too small for the ogres. So swords, axes, stuff like that, and they would just load it up into this bucket and just fling it across the battlefield and hope to chop some heads off while they did it.
Literally pieces of glass and splinters of wood. Anything they could find, they just put it in there.
Sharp stuff.
Sharp stuff, yes.
And I love this unit so much because it just exemplifies the nobblers so perfectly. Where I got
both
the model
minis
here.
Throughout the year. Both minis were fantastic.
Yeah, I've got the newer plastic one, just because the old metal one was really hard to find at the time. So there was a time where we were going to play this campaign where we were going to do like New Year, New Army kind of thing, and every quarter play a game and build it up by like, started with like 1,000 points and then add like 250 every quarter till the end of the year. You had 2,000 points, which was awesome. Except we never played any games. As
This is
usual.
before the pandemic,
Right? Wait, this is probably like it may have been before Lily, probably 7, 8 years ago.
Yeah, this is definitely
Easy.
before my kids. For sure.
And I've always wanted to play Ogres, and I never really did. And I knew JB had a bunch, so he let me borrow his for a year, however many years ago, and I added some stuff to it, and I got the scrap launcher. I was so excited. Love the model. Just never played with it. I've never actually done anything with it. But the scrap launcher was interesting because it didn't see a lot of playtime on the table because it came in the same kit as the Iron Blaster. Iron Blaster?
Which
right?
Iron Blaster.
Yeah,
Right.
so it was this giant cannon. It was a cannon of the, what are they called? Sky Titans?
Yep.
And
So more or less Jack and the Beanstalk, except ogres.
Yeah.
So there are mountains in the Mountains of Mourn that are tall enough to go into the Sky Kingdoms, where the Sky Titans lived, which were essentially like massive air giants. And the ogres one day found out that they had stuff that the ogres didn't, and they wanted them. So they just invaded. Like they just in droves, like 10-foot tall itty bitty ants came out of the ground, essentially the clouds. And the thing that they brought to the table was the cannon of the Sky Titans, which the ogres strapped onto the back of a Rhinox and filled it with, I think it was like a ton of cannonballs.
It was
like
a bunch of cannonballs.
Yeah, and they were just like, all right, let's boom, you know.
So it was like their version of a great case. It was a cannon for ogres. It was massive. And that was, everybody took that on the tabletop because it was just better. Point for point, it was better than the scrap launcher. But I like the idea of the scrap launcher better, so I took that because I don't care about what's better. That's why I don't win a lot. So
that mini that Dan has, from the front of the Rhinox to almost where the flingy part, yeah, that was the cannon. That was the size of the cannon.
Probably has a bit somewhere, but I'm not going to dig that out right now.
It was massive. It was awesome.
Right? And it just obliterated anything that it shot. It was stupid. They were so good.
I shot a lot of things with it.
Hate it. I hate your cannons and rock launchers.
Poor Phoenix.
So the last thing I have here to talk about with the ogres in terms of like the different parts of their army is the biggest of boys. My favorite, though we had the worst weapon, the Thunder Tusk.
Oh,
which is like a giant angry woolly mammoth.
All right, can we say it at the same time? Sphere, ready? 1, 2, 3. Sphere of frost wreathed ice.
You have to say it so slowly because it's impossible. So we see in the picture here, it has this like cold breath, and it could focus that breath right in front of, and like within its horns to create this big old sphere of ice, and then throw it across the battlefield. And it was a stone thrower. It was stupidly good, but they called it the sphere. I can't even say it without making weird noises.
It's bad.
Sphere of frost wreathed ice. Even saying it slow, it's so difficult.
So we were just like, I'm going to do the ice
ball. What there was something we called it ice snot or something like that. It's going to spit ice at you. Whatever. It was such a good thing in the game, and it looks so awesome. And take the unfinished painted guys on it. But the model is amazing.
Yeah.
It always reminded me of these dudes from Final Fantasy IX in the first Ice Temple. They had those big tusks. But I know not everybody likes Final Fantasy. Shut up, Taylor.
Whatever that means.
Tim will get it at least. I know he understands what the Ice Cavern is. But these things are just awesome, and they introduced a new level of size to Warhammer. Yeah. I'm pretty sure these are the first model. This and it's the counterpart that came in the same box. You could build it as a stone horn that had these giant horns sticking out the side of its head, and like over time they turned to stone, which was they had pretty cool lore about them. But I'm pretty sure these are the first ones of this size, where see the size of that base I just held up is just
unbelievably massive.
It's just huge.
So I think the first on that size base was the Arachnarok.
Oh, I think that's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because Orcs and Goblins were the first 8th edition, right?
Right. Yeah, so the Arachnarok Spider was the first one on that base, but I feel like the Thunderhusk and Stonehorn really solidified that new type of unit in the game.
Yeah.
And it was not great. They look
Um,
so cool. They were amazing, but they didn't figure out the rules for big monsters in Warhammer until Age of Sigmar.
So the Stonehorn was really good. The Thunder Tusk was a great support piece, but it suffered being a monster. The Stonehorn was really good because when it got shot with a cannon, it took half wounds. And
Right.
that was
Yes.
literally it. But it still only had like 6 wounds. So
Well, they had this horrible problem in Warhammer fantasy battles, especially in 8th edition, where big things just died so
yep,
easily. Like that huge monster has like 5 or 6 wounds,
yep,
and usually not much of an armor save at all. Like maybe a 5 up. So like you put him against rank and file swordsmen from the Empire, it's going to die.
yep. Which
And
shouldn't. It should
no,
not.
they should have had at least double the amount of wounds, if not triple.
Right.
And like because that monster would cost as much as 2 or 3 units of those swordsmen.
Yeah, it was a good 300 or 400 points at least.
Easy, yeah.
You know.
And it was just so disappointing that they were so awesome looking, but not so great. Like you learn pretty quickly that this, especially the Thunder Tusk, was not meant to run forward and crash into units. It was to
Right.
hang back and charge in with a full unit of ogres, because anything that it was against automatically attack last.
Which is good for ogres because they're initiative 2, so they're
Yes.
second to last on the initiative list.
Yes, so they need that support. And again, it was interesting how they built ogres to be a little bit more finessey than you would think from
Right.
big old fat monsters.
Which is right. It's hilarious because ogres are just charge forward and eat things, whereas playing
You'd
the
think.
army, right? Playing the army was more or less using their movement 6 to the best of your ability
Yes.
and finessing around everything, and then the whole army goes in.
Right,
You know?
picking your targets carefully,
Yep.
because if you didn't, the ogres would just get wrecked back. Because they were toughness 4, and they had a decent amount of wounds, but they had almost no armor to speak of, and they would
Yep.
still die in droves.
Yep. Unless you had a really good magic phase.
Yes, their magic certainly helped to mitigate that. If you were silly and didn't want to feel the butcher for whatever reason, then they really
Right.
died all the time.
Right.
But it was one of the weaknesses of the design where you kind of had to have a butcher to increase their durability. But we're not here to talk about the tactics of the tabletop game. We're talking about the lore.
Oh.
I go all over the place. What drove you to ogres? Why did you end up playing them?
They were the embodiment of Warhammer Fantasy.
Mm.
Everything that I loved about Warhammer Fantasy, the entire world and story, always came back in an ogre for some reason. Which is one thing I'm not sure, unless I was tinkling and you went over this. Man-eaters.
No, I did not talk about man-eaters.
So man-eaters were essentially ogres that decided they were bored living in the Mountains of Mourn, and they just left to go do things, right? They just like, I'm going to go to the Empire and just do whatever I want. So that's a pirate man-eater, right? Who would have been a pirate on a pirate ship and then for whatever reason came back to be part of the Ogre Kingdoms or just kept doing his thing, right? Most of the time they were mercenaries, but almost everywhere in the old world, there was an ogre. Like randomly, there was an ogre lifting things, and there was an ogre who was dressed up as a pirate. There, ogres just showed up for whatever reason, and as long as you fed them, they would do whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah, they're not like inherently evil. They just want to eat. So if you can
Yep.
pay that, or if you can pay them to be able to buy their own food, because they're not terribly intelligent, but they're not totally stupid either.
I think it was like 14 or 15-year-olds intelligence. That was a tyrant usually.
Yeah,
I think that was and that's the highest they got.
right. Like they certainly weren't stupid like a troll, but
that's a 14 or 15-year-old in the Empire, not
yeah.
like
uneducated 14 or 15-year-old in the Empire. So they could reason and logic and whatnot, but they weren't terribly intelligent.
Right.
But I love the idea of man-eaters, that just some ogres have this insatiable wanderlust and they just want to go visit, see the world, and they can do that really well because they're a 10-foot tall monstrosity that's very hard to kill. And they have relatively long lifespans. They're not like dwarves or elves by any means, but they can live quite a long time, in large part because they're hard to kill. And living in this world, that's important.
Right, exactly. But what really drew me was like I said, they were the embodiment of fantasy. They were funny. they were brutal. They had a really good like almost like dark setting society. Like
Yeah.
everything about Warhammer Fantasy, the gritty and the funny, was in this army, and I was like, I fell in love. I really did.
Yeah.
Plus, they were fat and they love to eat. I love to eat. Come on.
I love to eat. They nailed it with the lore and the feeling of the ogres. The rules, not so much. It took some finagling. They got better over the time of the editions, but it still wasn't
Yeah.
great. But yeah, I love the lore. The main tribe that they talk about in the books and like the studio army was painted as were their big thing was that their one fist they would dip in blood before a
Yeah.
fight, so they would always have one hand that was red.
Yep.
And there's the big names for ogres too. I
Yeah.
love that bit where like part of their magic item allotment characters could take big names, and it was like some like giant feller or whatever
Yep.
they called him. I forget.
Long strider. You just gain an inch to movement. Like.
Oh yeah, everybody took long strider.
Yep.
So
sure
good.
did.
Giant breaker, that was the one. Plus
Yep.
one strength. And I just love the idea that and that became part of their name. So it was, we did these feats, these sagas almost, sort of influenced by like Viking type lore. But it's like, I completed this saga, now it's part of my name, and I love that little bit. But
Yeah.
you nailed it with the whole like dark, but funny at the same time, and like to me
That's fantasy,
that is Warhammer Fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah. In
When
the
the
early,
scariest. Go ahead.
no, what are you saying?
When the scariest thing that can happen is like the entire underground of the world is run over by just rat people that want to just destroy everything, but they cannot function as a society at all and screw up all the time. That's dark and hilarious. That's Warhammer Fantasy. Like
They're like Shredder from the original Ninja Turtles cartoon if he was actually evil.
Oh my gosh.
Just kind of incompetent in their own way. But yeah, to me, Warhammer is so one part dark, one part humorous.
Yeah.
When Grim Podcast of Perilous Adventure first came out, the first few weeks, we got a little bit of slack and people saying that like it wasn't grim and perilous enough. And I was like, well, we're just starting.
Yeah.
But we got the humor part down, I think.
And that's a part of fantasy for sure. Like
I think I argue it in one episode to kind of
yes, you do. I
defend
just
this a
watched
little
it.
bit. It was like, well, there will be dark parts coming up for sure. The way that adventure was written is that it kind of is this slow boil into madness. Crazy things happening. But in the beginning, yeah, it's a little goofy. We're meeting some people in the world, kind of getting things established, and then stuff gets weird.
Right.
It
Don't give too much away. I'm only on episode 16.
Still?
Yeah, still.
We just recorded 46 and 47 the other day.
Oh gosh, really? I'm so far behind.
But only I think 39 was the last one to come out. So you got some catching ups to do. But yeah, so that humor aspect, and they just do it so well with the ogres that they're so goofy but terrifying. Like I would not want to fight an ogre army.
On the table or not.
Right? They just nailed it right out of the gate. So perfect.
For sure.
Some of the things I look at that GW comes out with and I'm like, really?
Like kangaroo cavalry.
No, those guys are awesome. I was gonna say because they're like kangaroo dinosaurs.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
The Lumineth hats that are like 8 feet tall and then have a thing at the top that like loops around with these big horns, and it's just like how could you possibly fight in that? How does it not just fall over all the time? It's so top heavy.
Yeah, some things they've done are ridiculous.
They do have some really cool looking stuff though. I do like the big mountain cow thing for them. But we're not talking about AOS here. We're talking about Warhammer Fantasy.
Real quick, one of my favorite things with ogres and orcs and goblins, and a lot of the armies that you can do with Warhammer, when you're building them, ogres are really, really, really good with this. You can just make up your own tribe, and you can do your own thing. Like you can do Golgfag's man-eater tribe, who is a horrible name for a man-eater. You can do, Greasiest Goldtooth's tribe, or you can just make your own and have like I'm gonna have them all covered with purple tattoos just because that's what they want to do,
I
for
did
no
blue
reason.
tattoos.
Right. So, the ones that I came up with were kind of like Gorgers, but a tyrant took over another tyrant, killed him, and took his entire tribe and locked them in a mountain.
Oh,
So
your
they were
cave
kind,
ogres are terrifying.
yeah. So they didn't have any magic items or weapons because they weren't out and about to collect anything. But there were so numerous, because I didn't spend hundreds of points on magic. So
It made
it
a
was
lot of. It was a good build that you didn't buy any magic items. So, like you said, it saved you like 300 points or something. You could
at
just
least, yeah.
field more big boys.
Because who doesn't love more fatties? Like,
Big fat parties. Do you still have anywhere your ogre achievements?
oh my gosh, I probably do.
Do you,
Actually, I'll have to look that up.
It was so awesome. He found this thing that somebody had made on some like ogre forum from back in the day before like Reddit was much of a thing, and it was called the Ogre Achievements. And then, like as you played games, you could check off the things that you did with your ogre army, and they were amazing. It was they
Yeah.
were. Do you remember any examples?
So one of them was like for the Hellheart on the table, it was like an aura, and every wizard within that aura gets affected. And one of them was like catch one wizard in the aura, catch three wizards, catch five wizards in the aura, right? So each one of them would have their own special name, like make a boxcar charge,
Yeah.
that sort of thing with a unit of bowls. So it was like the fat train's coming or something like that. They all had these ridiculous names.
I remember there were times in the game where I'm like, I hope this happens so you get that ogre achievement so we can say that you achieved this thing with this awesome, ridiculous name. Even though it'd be bad for me, it'd be hilarious and I'd love it.
They were so fun. They
So
were so
fun.
much fun.
Yeah, so
I'm looking it up actually.
you're trying to find it now?
Yeah.
I love that. And there'd be times where like we'd play in town and Taylor lived out of town, so he'd have to drive all his stuff over. And then it'd be like, no, I forgot my ogre achievement papers. I can't check things off. Oh no.
Oh, they were like stapled together. It was like 7 pages. It was
There was a
great.
lot. I was impressed at how many of these people thought up of. I wish I remember. If you can find it, I'd love to give them some credit. I don't even know if like that website's still out. Wasn't it like on the mod.org or
It
something?
was the ogrestronghold.com,
That's it. Ogre Stronghold. They did some
which is
awesome
no
stuff.
longer a website. That's super sad.
Another casualty of Age of Sigmar,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
I wonder if they have the Ogre Stronghold with
That's
O
fair.
G O R. Because they're not
Oh,
called
jeez.
ogres in AOS, they're called ogres.
Yeah, see, and that's something I never got into was the ogres or any of the stuff in AOS. For some reason, it just didn't appeal to me because the Warhammer, like I said, they were the epitome of Warhammer fantasy to me.
I
You
feel
know.
like AOS has really gotten away from the humor aspect
Mm,
of Warhammer, where I feel like in Warhammer it was never too obvious. It was usually something kind of subtle.
yeah,
Sometimes more obvious, with things like squigs
yeah,
or scrap launchers, but I feel like it was usually this undercurrent of dark humor, and I feel like AOS just doesn't have that. It's more of like the grim dark fantasy, like
right.
40k.
We've talked about this ad nausea, but you know how I feel about 40k and how they're just trying to move,
Yeah,
AOS and fantasy too. But anyways,
so I try to stay away from that topic on here just because I don't want it to become like an AOS bash. Because it's not all bad. I love Soulbound. The
no, we
RPG is great. The
some of
world,
the go ahead.
I said the actual the Mortal Realms aren't is a pretty cool setting actually.
A
It's
lot of the
just the
games that
game
that
is not good.
a lot of the games that you and I have played have been pretty decent. I got to be honest. Like, not all of them. Some of them just didn't make sense, but a lot of them were really good. Especially the one where that great unclean one just like died and then came back. That was my favorite one. Uh,
I'm just gonna stop the
so,
stream right now. If you want to
and
see
we're
that,
done.
look on YouTube. You can still find it. Look up the Trouble in the Deeps campaign,
Oh
where
yeah.
we played. It was so focused on the Ideneth Deepkin, and we played a bunch of different games. I think it was like 6 games or so, where they were up against a couple things. We tried to make a narrative campaign out of it. And it was super fun and awesome. But we just
It was a
haven't been
good
able to do that
campaign.
for a while. Yeah, yeah. For Whom the Die Rolls was our YouTube channel there. It's still there. Look
Yeah.
up From the Die Rolls, Trouble in the Deeps. I thought it was really cool at the time. Um, But I think that's about all we have time for today. We did do extra 15 minutes there to make up for the technical difficulties. So
We'll say
thanks.
it's my fault because I'm the guest. So
Sure. No, I'd say it's my fault because I'm the host. I
Oh,
don't
there you
know why it didn't work, how I fixed it, but hey, if you were listening to the podcast version, you got to miss that because I'll cut that whole 15 minutes out of going, I don't know why this isn't working. If you watch the whole thing through on YouTube, thank you. If I didn't figure out how to edit it down, you're the best, and I hope you had a great time. Thank you so much for joining us, Taylor.
Absolutely.
For more Taylor, check out twitch.tv/Throlash Gaming.
That's me. I'll put it in chat.
THROLASH Gaming.
There it is. Oh, it highlighted me because I mentioned myself.
You just tagged yourself on. Taylor does a great job. Has a ton of fun playing mostly Minecraft. Have you branched out anything else yet? I haven't been able to catch your stream in a while.
Minecraft Dungeons.
Oh yeah.
And I did play a little bit of World of Warcraft on stream. Yeah, right. But we'll probably get into like some Elder Scrolls stuff at some point. I just got to get the right mods to make it look like it wasn't made in the early 2000s.
2012.
Yep.
Where's Elder Scrolls 6? What are they doing? I'm not gonna be able to play it anyway because Microsoft.
No. I mean Morrowind. That was like.
Oh, you're going way back. I've only ever played Skyrim. I never got into the other games. I didn't really get Bethesda games until Skyrim, and then I played that one. I was like, oh, you just pick up everything and sell it.
Yeah.
That's how you play this game.
No, you hoard it. You kill someone, take their house, and then dump all of your stuff on the floor. Oh. That's how you play those games.
I did enjoy Skyrim a lot, but I never played any of the other ones.
Well, when I start doing Morrowind, just, come on by.
Yeah, can you make it look like it wasn't made in like 2006?
I'm working on it.
It's pretty ugly.
I'm working on it.
It's really ugly. All right.
I can get like 2008-ish era.
So, other than that, everything else here at the Professional Casual Network, I'm sure Taylor can recommend those things as well. Obviously, Sundays is this. What comes out on Mondays, Taylor?
Besides the Marvel Crisis Protocol stream, which is at the end of the day, but the Lost Omens podcast, which is a Pathfinder actual play.
Pathfinder 2nd edition.
2nd edition, where you can see me as Zaresk, who is the crazy lizardman person.
Lizard folk, yeah.
So actually, they're completely remaking Morrowind and Skyrim. It's called Skywind. It looks beautiful. They're not done yet, but you are absolutely correct, Tim. Going through every single story, they're redoing every single voice and everything. It looks beautiful.
Nice. So that is Mondays. Danny is running us through the Extinction Curse adventure path, and it is a blast.
Oh my god, it's so much fun.
We're doing one of what we call a marathon recording session tomorrow, and I am pumped. As long as the weather doesn't ruin it, I'm going to be real mad if that happens. But really excited for that. We're delving through a big dungeon right now and having a great time. But yeah, then Monday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard, is the Power Phase, where we play Marvel Crisis Protocol. The Taylor guests on here and there when we can drag them over the hills. Tuesdays is a day that happens during the week. Wednesdays is Patreon Day, where we have extra Patreon content come out. All of our regular podcast shows have video with it available on the Patreon, including the Lost Omens podcast. But Wednesdays we have bonus vlogs. The podcast version of this show comes out on our Patreon RSS feed you can get. We have once in a while Tim does like State of the Union updates when we have new like big news and things to talk about. But Wednesdays are our We Love Patreon days. And then Thursdays we have a Grim Podcast or Perilous Adventure, our Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition actual play show. We're playing through The Enemy Within, and we very recently just wrapped up the first installment, the first fifth of the story, The Enemy in Shadows, and we're moving on to Death on the Reich. I'm not going to give any spoilers.
I almost took my earphones out.
Don't worry about it. And again, the video for that is also on our Patreon. Oh, on Wednesdays, coming up very soon, is going to be our Settling the Southlands, brand new Patreon exclusive campaign for patrons at the $10 tier and above, where a whole new party, brand new adventurers are heading to the Southlands to try to help establish an imperial colony. we've recorded the first couple episodes of it already, and it is awesome. I'm loving it. The characters that people came up with are amazing. We have Tim, Danny, and Alex rejoining us from a Grim Podcast Perilous Adventure, and we have newcomer Jess, who just nailed it. She meshed with everybody perfectly. She is role playing, like we are very, very pleased with her. I guess I don't know how to say it without sounding condescending. She did great. Tim didn't even play an objectable character. That's true. That was Alex. Alex took that this time.
Nope.
It's weird.
Not watching it.
Yeah, we will have video for that as well on Patreon. That'll be a while before that comes out. We need to get a little bit of a backlog going. We are doing a promo right now where patrons at the $10 tier and above can create an NPC with me that'll be part of that game. If people are interested in that, we've got a few in development. One has already made an appearance on the show, in the recording, and that's something that's super fun. Yes, sir.
I have an idea for an ogre.
Okay. That sounds good.
Sweet.
Hit me up in Discord or chat about it.
Awesome.
I have conversations with you in like 3 different chat programs.
Dude,
for whatever
seriously.
reason. And then Fridays is everybody's favorite hour and a half, usually at least, until they get to the actual meat of the show. Nonsense of Elite 8 Showdown with Tim and Big Chuck, going over everything, and I think I said everything twice, but they do an 8 subject bracket on all kinds of weird stuff. Our most recent episode was the most annoying things that couples do as a Valentine's Day episode. And so far I'm really surprised that I haven't been called out directly for anything, so that makes me a little happy.
And let me express how much meat is in this show sometimes. Like, there's glizzies and everything.
Yeah, particular kinds of meat. There's video for that as well. And then Saturday's kind of a day off day, but we've got something almost every day of the week. So much content. Joining the Patreon also gives you access to our awesome Discord that I actually need to catch up on after doing this stream. I've gotten behind. See, I have messages there. So, yeah, if you haven't joined yet, go do that. It's fun.
Do it. It is fun.
Otherwise, next week, doing a special episode. The first thing that... Twitch subs also get access to the Discord now. Something relatively new we've got set up.
Oh, cool. Very nice.
But next week, doing kind of a special episode. When I first announced this show on different Facebook groups, somebody specifically requested a show about Albion, the mist-covered isle. And I said, you know what? I'll do that for sure, but probably not right away, because I kind of want to get things established with the show first, because I'm going to do a lot of reading about Albion, because I don't know that much about it. I know there's things like fen beasts and weird wizards from there.
Amir, right?
I think Famir are there as well. But yeah, I got to do some reading about it and find out more about Albion, and I'll be talking about that next week.
Awesome.
I'm excited for it. That'll be big old episode number 10. Which is pretty cool.
Thanks for having me, my man. That was
Thanks so
a
much
lot of fun.
for joining. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we'll see. Probably have guests here and there as we go forward. Probably get a bit more specific about things after we cover all like the major armies. I still have quite a few to go through, like Bretonnians and Tomb Kings and Vampire Counts and Chaos in general. I haven't talked too much about Chaos at all. I'm just realizing like I need to talk about demons and stuff.
That'll be a fun one. I have 2 Demons books if you need one.
I think I've got a couple different versions of Demons books. And all kinds of things we can talk about here. But thanks again for joining us, Taylor. Check out Throlash Gaming on Twitch. And then we'll see you next week for Albion.
Bye.
Thanks, bye. I always said the wrong